My master is the beginning, and he is the end. He is the master of mortals, and the core of our dead hearts. Deny him, and you deny yourselves. Honor him, and acknowledge he to whom we owe it all. The Saga of KHORNE. KHORNE, also known as the Blood God, the Lord of Murder, the Lord of Skulls, Hunter of Souls, and the Hound in Norska, is the major chaos god of war, hatred, wrath, rage, murder, blood, strength, courage, and martial honor. He is the second eldest of the major ruinous powers, and his waxing strength in this time of constant conflict often renders him the mightiest of the chaos gods in his effect on the world and in the great game between the gods. His domain encompasses the most basic and brutal of sentient emotions: hate, anger, rage, the desire for destruction, and the joy of killing one's enemies. Every act of killing or murder in the mortal world feeds and empowers KHORNE. The more senseless, vicious, and bloodthirsty, the better. However, though KHORNE is the god of bloody slaughter, he is also the god of martial pride and honor, of those who set themselves against the most dangerous foes and earn victory against the odds. His warriors, though gore-maddened berserkers all, take no artful approach to killing, for such indulgent displays serve only to empower Slaanesh, the honorless adversary of KHORNE amongst the company of the gods. KHORNE is known by 1,000 names in the northern lands of the Chaos Waste. He is called Karneth, Akar, KHORNE, Korgar, the Axe Father, the Blood Father, the Wolf Father, the Blood Wolf, and yet other uncounted multitudes of titles and aspects. The Blood God is worshipped by almost every tribe of men in the north. For the Northmen are warrior peoples who exult in the contest of arms, particularly those of Norska, who most eagerly of all embrace KHORNE's call to eternal warfare. A man that has put his faith in KHORNE is just as likely to be a blood-crazed killer as he is an honorable warrior, and oftentimes he will be both at the same time. KHORNE is the embodiment of martial honor and courage, said to smile upon all feats of valor, strength, and blood-drenched warrior skill. He is also the divine patron of proud warriors who set themselves against the odds and emerge triumphant through the display of these traits. He is said to exalt the brave of both sides of a battle, while at the same time laying his terrible vengeance upon the cowardly and craven. According to the warrior code of his devotees, it is the solemn right of every warrior to die an honorable death in battle with sword and axe in hand. His manifestation. Blood for the Blood God, skulls for the Skull Throne. An excerpt from the diary of a Crimson Skull cultist, found by a witch hunter in Talabheim. No mortal man would be able to lay their eyes upon KHORNE, and survive. But various heretical writers have suggested that the blood god looks somewhat like one of his mighty bloodthirster greater demons, only infinitely more terrifying, his eyes burning with endless fury in the center of his dog-like face. KHORNE is said to have mighty forges and armories that run for leagues, belching sooty filth into the lightning-cracked air. Yet he will forever favor a single combination of arms. He is encased in his brass armor, capable of deflecting any blow, and clutches his colossal sword that could carve continents into pieces. KHORNE's mighty throne room, built atop of his great brass tower, is supported by 8 gigantic brass pillars in honor of the sacred number of the blood god. He sits resplendent in his rage upon his brass throne, resting atop a mountain of bloody skulls, built from the countless heads of great champions his followers have slain over an immeasurable number of eons. The tower itself rises leagues into the blackened sky, surrounded by a moat of molten blood, filled with the screaming enemies of KHORNE, whilst the blackened brass walls are filled with monstrous carvings that depict the endless rage of the occupant within. The room itself is filled with his favored fleshhounds, including the mighty Karanak, blessed with 3 heads and far more powerful than the rest of his kin. Some have described these loyal beasts as a bodyguard to KHORNE, but to him they are but pets, as the blood god has never been bested in mortal combat, and thus needs no protection. Even if another of the ruinous powers were to enter the brass tower, KHORNE knows that he alone would prove triumphant. Such is his infinite strength and skill. KHORNE is the least subtle of the Chaos Gods. He puts none of his will into any endeavor that does not cause bloodshed. His lands in the realm of chaos are barren, cracked and dry, save for the ceaseless rivers of blood fueled by endless combat. Throughout his realm, legions of warriors fling themselves into combat purely for the sake of battle. It is not uncommon to see the warriors and champions of KHORNE fighting amongst themselves, dueling and battling to prove their skill in combat and rise higher in the eyes of their lord. KHORNE cares not from where blood flows, and skulls are sacrificed, so long as it is done in his name. Only bloodletting through physical combat is acceptable, however, for KHORNE disdains magic. None of his followers are permitted to be sorcerers, although some will carry magic-imbued weapons or armor in order to augment their killing ability. All of KHORNE's demons are built to kill quickly and efficiently, while the troops of the other ruinous powers may fall back to recover or bring other talents into play. The demons of KHORNE always fight to the death, cursing their enemies, their mounds of sinewy muscle carving their last steps through the front lines. KHORNE's demons continue to spill blood and claim skulls until the last roar of defiance and rage from their gaping maws has been silenced. Then their bodies, further sacrifices to the Lord they served so faithfully, are crushed to dust and ash by the next wave of his blood-crazed troops, all screaming endlessly, "Blood for the Blood God, skulls for the throne of KHORNE," as they poured into glorious combat. His relations to rival powers. The Ruiners' powers often spend more time concerned with besting their rival gods than trying to implement their carefully crafted plans upon the old world. The conflicting desires and ideologies of Nurgle, Slaanesh, and Tzeentch are so opposed that it becomes clearer why these immense powers spend so much of their energies in conflict with each other. KHORNE, however, has an understandably difficult relationship with the other powers in that his philosophy is so different that the others find it difficult to understand him. The Blood God loathes magic, for example, and yet all of the other powers are wielders of powerful magic, this alone marking KHORNE apart from his peers. Nurgle is abhorrent to KHORNE. The Lord of Decay sits and waits in his pestilence, and if it were his way, would wait for eons for his plans to come slowly to fruition. Nurgle is quite happy for his followers to avoid direct combat, instead allowing them to simply spread disease and plague. To KHORNE, this approach does not have the honor of bloody combat. KHORNE revels in direct action, and the passive approach of Nurgle is totally at odds with the Blood God's principles. Nurgle is a god who believes that his goals will be achieved through careful building and stewardship of his blessings, whereas KHORNE only cares for destruction. Tzeentch delights in baiting KHORNE. The Changer of Ways is the most confusing, subtle, and maddening of the Ruiners' powers. KHORNE is not unintelligent, but he has no time for subtlety, and his rage consumes more complicated emotions. Tzeentch therefore plays tricks upon KHORNE for his own amusement, which KHORNE responds to in the only way he knows how: violence. The Changer of Ways is also the greatest source of magic amongst the Chaos Gods, and KHORNE does not look kindly upon this fact. Tzeentch, in his estimation, is a coward, cringing behind a wall of trickery and simple conjuring instead of having any real power. He is a weakling, sustained only by the Aether. If his source of power were to diminish, then KHORNE would raise his forces and crush the home of the Changer of Ways, the impossible fortress. One might imagine that Slaanesh, being the Prince of Pleasure and of Pain, possesses the ideology closest to KHORNE's. However, while no one can deny that KHORNE's legions cause unbelievable pain, KHORNE does not actually aim to cause suffering. Indeed, of all the Chaos Gods, Slaanesh is the most diametrically opposed to KHORNE. A patron of the arts and lover of aesthetically pleasing objects, Slaanesh's focus is inward, acting on his followers through their taste for decadent pleasures. He ingratiates them slowly, their taste for pleasure or pain becoming harder to satiate and requiring more and more perverse acts in order to feel anything at all. Decadence begets perversion, which begets abomination and utter depravity. And it is this methodology that is alien to KHORNE. The blood god has no time for pleasure or eroticism. Indeed, all feelings are wasted except rage, hate, and vengeance. Slaanesh corrupts people from within, building on their inner thoughts and desires, while KHORNE always builds from without, focusing on outer strength and power. Slaanesh would delight in a grotesquely obese follower gorging himself upon expensive delicacies, but KHORNE cares only for muscle and sinew to give strength in battle. Slaanesh lets his followers enjoy life to the fullest, fulfilling their most perverse desires. KHORNE simply seeks to cause death. These two gods are constantly at war with one another, each believing that they have the upper hand, or can soon gain it, in their endless struggle. It is the constant relief of the old world that the Chaos Gods have not united under their one common aim, to destroy all existing civilization. His personification. The mouth is opening, red creatures pouring from the maw. The land is burnt and bare, the sky is ablaze, men are fallen, and armies scattered by his might. And then there comes a hero, and he wields the weapon of the Lord, and he does smite his enemies, and the hero and the weapon become one, and the land is lost. An old Yark's rant. KHORNE may not be the subtlest of the ruinous powers, but that is not to say that he does not have goals and ambitions to fulfill beyond seeing blood spill in his name. His rage may be endless, his fury immutable, but KHORNE has a savage intelligence, seeing the need to lay seeds for his destructive plans to pay off in the future. KHORNE revels in a man who seeks glory, for in old world society, this leads frequently to feelings of anger to one's enemies and a need to see them dead. Others may turn over to the ruinous powers in order to have their ambitions fulfilled. Examples include the militiaman who simply dreams of having the strength to repel his foes in order to see his wife and young child again, or the aging knight who wishes the strength of his youth still coursed through his veins. At the same time, many despair at their fate, and whilst KHORNE finds this pathetic, he may still bestow blessings upon these wretched souls. Sometimes there is no better servant than one who is picked up at the lowest ebb and given his wish. The hearts of this kind of man often burn most fiercely for KHORNE. Some servants of KHORNE come willingly, others are slowly drawn in. There is a fine line between justice and vengeance, and in seeking revenge, many people cannot control the nihilism and anger within themselves, which spills over into a fury that cannot be purged from their body. This leads them into direct exposure to the principles KHORNE espouses, and far too often the wrath has so consumed the person that inevitably the blood god then consumes their very soul. For KHORNE's order to be imposed across the Empire, he first requires anarchy. If the established order of Emperor Karl Franz, the Grand Theogenist, and the Temple of Sigmar has been overthrown, the old world will be critically and permanently weakened. More and more it appears as if the old races, the dwarves, the elves, the slann, no longer have the numbers to withhold the advances of chaos without relying on the relatively undeveloped but numerous humans. Anarchy itself gives special pleasure to KHORNE in comparison to his rival gods, because in times of anarchy, there is inevitably conflict, and when there is such widespread bloodshed, it is inevitable that skulls shall be lifted into the air by bawling, muscled warriors offering their sacrifice to the blood god. KHORNE loves to see mindless destruction and violence, the looting, decay and devastation that come with the fall of organized society, all feed his lust for wanton destruction. KHORNE is not associated with subterfuge, but from his brass tower, the will that he imposes upon his followers has been confused by many a man. In the heat of a raging battle, warriors call upon their gods for strength, but it may not always be the guiding hand of Ulrich or Sigmar that answers the mortal men who petition the deities, but the blood god. Equally, cultists of KHORNE can occasionally show a modicum of patience and foresight compared to their patron. Throughout the Empire, cults such as the Crimson Skull, the Flayed Blood, and the Wrath of KHORNE scheme and plan. These sects secretly turn the minds and souls of warriors into mindless minions of KHORNE. Often, soft-minded warriors are their target, lured into a group they initially believe worships Sigmar or Ulrich. All of the ruinous powers strive to achieve dominion over the world, and the life that crawls about its daily drudgery, which has no concept of the beings of pure power that inhabit the realm of chaos. KHORNE, however, strives for more than simple control. He looks for utter dominance. This is a trait often found in his followers, as they have been known, even in battle, to turn upon each other, dueling till the death. For aspiring warriors of KHORNE, there is no goal, no feat that is more desirable than inflicting utter defeat upon a champion of the blood god, and KHORNE actively encourages this attitude amongst his followers. He is not a being that any mortal can claim to have seen, yet his very name inspires fear. Those unlucky enough to have set eyes upon his demons will no doubt suffer nightmares until their dying day, and know that their very survival was a miracle, even if the mental scars remain. Those that have faced his warriors in battle know of the frenzy, the bloodlust, and the almighty strength and power that lets these brutes carry on even after receiving what would be a mortal wound to an average man. And the stories of these battles inspire fear in the citizens of the cities, towns, and villages across the Empire and across the old world. And KHORNE can profit from fear. Whole battalions of elite troops have been known to turn tail and attempt to escape from his demonic hordes, but this inevitably leads to their slaughter. Sometimes, this fear can even attract followers. Some can no longer see the influence of Sigmar, Tal, Shalia, Raya, or any of the Imperial gods upon the land, but they have witnessed the ravening power of the Chaos gods, thus believing that the world as they know it must be nearing an end. This kind of person seeks to worship Chaos in an attempt to save his soul when the inevitable end arrives. Merely by his reputation and the furious rage of his servants in battle mimicking the personality of their liege means that KHORNE has become a far more dangerous and powerful foe, and he seeks to spread fear throughout the old world. His plots and purposes. KHORNE requires blood. KHORNE requires skulls. KHORNE requires violence, destruction, and utter subservience to this cause. His blessings are not a sign of kindness, love, devotion, or even care. They are a means to an end, designed to increase the efficiency of his killing machines, driving them on to greater acts of ferocity. If KHORNE does not care about the lives of his minions, the minions themselves seem to care even less. The hate that fills them eventually dominates their every thought. Driven onwards in battle, KHORNE's followers eagerly sacrifice themselves to the blade, and retreat is never an option. The Blood God himself sits impassively. He simply seeks out destruction and bloodshed, and cares not from where it comes. His indifference does, however, mean that KHORNE is always in need of new champions. There is a dual purpose to this need. When a warrior falls, a new one is needed to step into the breach, to take his place so that KHORNE can gain the upper hand in his struggle against the other ruinous powers. Secondly, fresh blood can test his existing champions. If they meet in a challenge, then KHORNE can only benefit. If the existing champion emerges victorious, then he will have learned something from the warrior he has just defeated, increasing his already impressive skills with his chosen weaponry. If the challenger walks away alive from the combat, then the defeated warrior was a weakling and unfit to serve KHORNE. His body will make a meager sacrifice, but no more. Through this brutal and bloody system, KHORNE slowly builds up the strength and power of his forces, waiting for the moment he can unleash them upon the unknowing world. KHORNE does have more minor plans than defeating his rival gods and destroying civilization. He realizes that it is unlikely that the world will fall in one swift motion, and so he looks to build his influence, spreading destruction, anarchy, and death wherever possible. The Blood God's marauders and warriors look to test the boundaries of the Empire and Kislev, probing for weaknesses and identifying suitable invasion points. These raids gradually weaken the defenses of the two nations, which take time to rebuild, whereas KHORNE has an endless supply of eager warriors. The gifts of KHORNE. The greatest of KHORNE's servants sometimes ascend to demonhood. While some will not have the physical or mental strength to accept such an abundance of gifts, devolving into mindless, gibbering chaos spawn, others will gradually take on a more impressive stature, growing free of their mortal shackles. For instance, the mortal body of Falkia the Bloody, consort of KHORNE, has been almost totally transformed. Her upper body has grown horns and wings, while her lower torso resembles that of a bloodletter more than that of a woman. Whatever gifts are bestowed, those with the mark of KHORNE look to seek out and challenge others worthy of combat, especially other devoted KHORNE worshippers. The Blood God favors those who sacrifice friends, allies, and enemies alike to him, and there is no greater trial than to destroy another cornered warrior in mortal combat. Any beast of chaos can be gifted with a mark of KHORNE, a symbol of the god's blessing, although this special gift is most often given to the strongest and most ferocious among them. Additionally, KHORNE can also bestow his gift upon certain chosen warriors and marauders. These mighty warriors are filled with a mere portion of KHORNE's rage, and yet it propels them into battle like they have been possessed. Warriors bearing the mark of KHORNE are more muscle than their comrades and have some other outward sign of the blessing they have received, such as red eyes, tears of blood, or great brands burned into their chests and arms. The gifts are as follows. The gift of arms, a weapon of the Blood God. The gift of beasts, beasts or servants to aid his chosen. The gift of flesh, mutations that grant strength and ferocity. The gift of will, unbreakable willpower and bloodlust. The gift of title, granted a demonic name, chosen to one day ascend demonhood. KHORNE's followers. Our Blood Lord has given us many great blessings this night. The sacrifices must have appeased his almighty rage, for the blood in our skull chalice became still. I drank deeply from the cup and felt renewed with almighty strength. I have no recollection of what occurred next, but when I woke, the other 7 were all dead. They were ripped to shreds, reduced to ooze upon the floor, bones ground to dust. What almighty power has my lord gifted to me? There is still blood left in this sacred vessel. Tonight I shall sip once more, and let the great wrath of KHORNE descend upon this city. I will sacrifice myself and all others who try to oppose me. From the diary of a Crimson Skull cultist, found by witch hunters in Talabheim. Certain groups are often attracted to one of the Chaos Gods in particular. Acolytes, hedge wizards, and sorcerers may be drawn to Tzeentch, the wealthy and pleasure seekers to Slaanesh, doctors, alchemists, and barber surgeons to Nurgle, and warriors to KHORNE. KHORNE, however, draws fewer true cultists than the other Chaos Gods. Tzeentch can provide great magical prowess. Slaanesh can bestow gifts of intense pleasure or pain, and Nurgle can provide mastery over plague and disease. KHORNE provides less subtle gifts than the other three, but the strength and power that he can bequeath makes him an obvious temptation for warriors. Of course, many of his followers do not realize the true corrupting power of chaos and have no idea that eventually they will be fully consumed by the gift of rage that the blood god provides. Some people can resist longer than others, but weaker minds are quickly overcome by the strength writhing within them and become mindless killing machines. The weakest succumb to the realm of chaos completely, warping into a mere parody of their former selves as slavering chaos spawn. If a warrior pleases KHORNE, he has been known to continue to bless his chosen so he might better carry out the will of the blood god. While one cultist in a million may eventually step upon the path to becoming a demon prince, the rest will, at some point, have their bodies fail to accept the changes thrust upon them. Skylar Anfingrim was once one of KHORNE's greatest champions, a warrior of immense strength hailing from the northern wastes. He killed by the thousand and received many rewards from KHORNE until, at last, his wasted body collapsed and transformed into a spawn. Although Skylar still curries the favor of KHORNE, unlike other Chaos Spawn, he is now fated to forever walk across the blasted, snowy wasteland, consuming all that he encounters. KHORNE's power to transform and recreate flesh should not be underestimated, as the story of his consort, Falkia the Bloody, demonstrates. Once a great warrior queen of the north, KHORNE looked upon her with something almost approaching fondness until she perished in battle. Racked with a rage that could have carved nations in two, KHORNE set about rebuilding Falkia's broken body. He raised her from death and made her part demon prince so that she would never fall again. Her body now sprouts great leathery wings, and from her forehead burst forth two massive horns, adding to her already considerable might. She now stays with her lord, master, and consort, often commanding his armies within the realm of chaos. The day she flies against mankind will be a day untold thousands breathe their final breath. Such is the power KHORNE has infused in her. The Northern Tribes. Over the centuries, raiders from above the Sea of Claws have always targeted Kislev and the northernmost provinces of the Empire. These raids have become increasingly brutal and deadly as the taint of chaos spreads across the northern wastes. In times gone by, these battle-hardened marauders and Kurgan forcibly settled in the areas that they targeted for pillaging and claimed local wives. Over time, as the grip of the ruinous powers upon the world has increased, their strength in the Northlands has grown exponentially. The taint of chaos is ever increasing, and has always been stronger in the north, due to the close proximity of the gateway into the realm of chaos. For this reason, the hard warriors of the North have always worshipped the Chaos Gods, even if the names of these gods have been warped along with the minds of the Norskins, Kurgan, and other tribes that periodically launch raids on the civilized settlements to the south. While all the tribes recognize the Chaos Gods as their masters, they may pray and shout to a different name, but it is always KHORNE, or one of the other ruinous powers, that is listening and responding to their cries. Thus, the raids from the north not only seek to find women, food and gold for the sake of survival, but also blood for the blood god. When the fur-cloaked warriors emerge from their longships onto the beaches, their aim may not be to pillage, but to kill, maim and destroy in the name of KHORNE, or one of the other Chaos Gods. The Northlands are a savage wasteland. Few who choose to live there have any ambition other than to become a great warrior and face the judgment of their god by traveling to the far north. Those few that return often come back bearing a great scar, brand, or tattoo, a mark of the favor they have received by becoming a chosen servant of their deity. Faith and honor have been wiped from the mindset of these peoples, thrown away for a craving for the blessings of the dark powers. Most of the livestock brought back from raids is sacrificed, and any weaklings found among them are thrown onto the same pyres. The tribes are in a state of constant strife, both with each other and with the lands to the south. In Kislev, where the border is less constant than the sea, the Ice Queen has been forced to reinforce the defenses of Prague and Erengrad against the increasing ferocity of Norskan attacks. Despite the greater quantity of attacks, the only facet of society remaining is loyalty to kin. Few dare to displease their family elders, for to do so will lead to being cast out into the wilds, with little chance of being accepted by other tribes. The civilized nations. The old world is a grim and dark place for all of its inhabitants. It is a bloody and violent continent, where not a moment passes without conflict and bloodshed. From the snow-filled north to the wastes and deserts of the south, thousands lose their lives each day as the engines of war march ever onwards. Magical entities are summoned, both by accident and design, into the world to wreak havoc. Bestial creatures retreat only to gather their strength for renewed assaults. The human inhabitants of these lands, despite thinking themselves civilized, are just as brutal as some of the so-called lesser races, from the Kurgan and marauders in the north to scimitar-wielding troops from Araby in the south. The Empire may be the greatest of these nations in terms of raw power, but its citizenry is also the most ripe to be turned to the causes of chaos. It has warred, at times, with all of its neighbors, spilling the precious blood of men rather than focusing on the far greater threat posed by chaos. Peace rarely lasts long, as men are ambitious and too willing to break treaties. Surrounded by enemies, the Empire must also guard against attacks from orcs, goblins, ogres, beastmen, skaven, and the undead. The Blood God cares not for pleasure, leaving such ridiculous emotions to the hated Slanesh, and feels only rage and hate. Yet this constant strife brings what might be described as pleasure to KHORNE. The destruction energizes him, feeding his hate, and he then uses that energy to incite greater acts of murder from his followers. The Beastmen. The Chaos Gods find that the Beastmen make useful minions. The cloven monstrosities are born of chaos. Yet unlike demons, they have all been birthed in the forests, and so can wander freely, unlike some of KHORNE's followers, who require some proximity to the realm of chaos in order to be sustained. Inside the Drakvald and other forests, the uncounted herds build herdstones to worship the ruiner's powers, bleating obscene cries as prayers. A warped parody of man and beast, KHORNE finds the Beastmen's brutality pleasing, filled with a loathing for man that has only increased with time. These creatures live to hunt and kill human flesh. He enjoys that the Beastmen are built for battle, whether it is the lowliest Ungor or the greatest Doombull. The destruction caused by the Cloven race can only further his cause. KHORNE knows that these beasts will continue their quest forever, and like the other ruiners' powers, rarely concentrates on such lowly creatures. Beastmen serve chaos regardless, neither comprehending the power of their foul deities, nor realizing their part in the plans of the four gods. Even so, sometimes KHORNE or one of the other ruiners' powers will take a particular interest in a single beastman. It will be little more than a disposable pawn, but some beastmen have been known to receive blessings and mutations specific to one of the ruiner's powers, though this is not common. Beastmen are already ferocious warriors that are fast, agile, tough-skinned, and fully capable of delivering crunching blows with their crude and rusty weaponry. Join me next time, when I will tell you about all the raging, bloodthirsty, and incomparably deadly demons of KHORNE. Until then, see you soon.